Hey everyone, welcome back to the How Strong series. In today's video, we're going to be covering the Pokemon you all voted for in the Dragonite video. And as you can tell by the thumbnail and title, that Pokemon is none other than Kabutops. This is going to be a really interesting one to talk about, as we've never done a fossil Pokemon before, so I'm pretty excited to talk about it. As always, be sure to comment down below how you think this week's Pokemon will do, and leave a like to show your support. If we can hit 2,000 likes on this video, that would help this series out a lot. One thing that I wanted to add before I started the video off, I wanted to make you all aware of a change I'm making on how I do these videos. There are some Pokemon that are not native in many of the games, despite being around for many generations. So I wanted to future-proof the series to make sure they got a shot at being talked about. If a Pokemon is native to the game, I'll talk about it as normal. But if they can be traded in any capacity and have no evolution limitations, then I will talk about them from the point you can start trading over, which is normally around the first gym. I hope you all don't mind this change, hopefully you even like it, as it gives a chance for your favorite to shine. Anyways, with all that being said, let's see just how strong Kabutops really is. Starting off in Generation 1, you can obtain Kabutops from reviving the Dome Fossil on Cinnabar Island. You'll need Surf to get here, which you can get after beating Koga this generation. In terms of gyms, you'll match up well against Blaine and Giovanni, since Blaine has no moves to really bother Kabutops. Meanwhile, Giovanni's team, besides Dig on Duck Trio, really only has Oko moves to actually threaten you at all. The Elite Four is a fairly mixed bag, since Kabutops actually struggles to take on Lorelei due to not having any rock-type attacks. Luckily, Kabutops at least has Submission as a possible TM, which you can buy in the department store or find in Victory Road, which will help a lot with taking on Lorelei. Agatha should luckily be a lot easier to handle due to her team not really having any good ways to damage Kabutops. But in terms of Bruno and Lance, I'd probably look into using something else. Finally, your rival, which your best matchup is if your rival chose Charizard, since Executor won't have any grass attacks, and really only Gyarados and to an extent Alakazam due to its high special stat really bother you at all in this battle. For the original Kanto games, I just recommend getting Squirtle, since Kabutops' move pool is so lackluster and it's hard to even justify training it up at this stage in the games. Since you can't obtain Kabuto or Kabutops normally in Gen 2, we'll be covering it as if we traded it over, which you can do after talking to Mr. Pokemon. Sadly, Kabutops in this generation has the opposite problem it had in Kanto, where this time around, it learns 0 water-type moves leveling up in either stage of its evolutionary line. This actually hurts Kabutops significantly, seeing that in the main story, it really only is useful against Falconer and Bugsy because of this, since both their gyms are weak to rock. The only problem is, Kabutops and Kabuto don't get any rock-type attacks until the 50s, so you're stuck with a Kabuto or Kabutops without any stab until you teach it TMO 4 rollout from Route 35, which is after those two gyms. Because of this, the only gym leaders in the entire game you'll have a good time against would be Brock or Blaine, since you can at least teach it Surf once it evolves into Kabutops for their teams. If it somehow wasn't clear, Kabutops is absolutely garbage this generation, and it is probably one of the worst Pokemon you could take the effort to obtain for your adventure. On the Generation 3, we once again will need the trade for Kabuto, which you can do once you obtain the Pokedex. While Kabuto again lacks a physical water option due to the way typing split in Generation 3 with physical and special, it's actually not a huge concern here due to the Geodude still being 4 times weak to absorb. Roxanne's gym should be a fairly neutral fight, but with a couple potions, you can definitely overcome her team. Your next 2 gym matchups will be pretty bad. However, Flannery should be more manageable with Rock Tomb, but you'll need to keep in mind Pokemon such as Camerupt and Numel if you're playing Emerald. Winona besides her Skarmory should be a breeze since her flying types won't really touch you besides Skarmory, which should have Steel Wing for you. As well as an Emerald should also have Tropius to beat your Kabuto. The rest of her team you'll be fine against however. By Tate and Liza, you will be able to have a Kabutops, which should help significantly here. However, even though you'll have Surf, their team can actually still definitely pose a threat with things such as Claydol and Emerald, and Solrock in both games having options around Kabutops if played well. If you're playing Ruby or Emerald, Team Magma should be easy. However, Team Aqua and Sapphire and Emerald, you'll need to teach Kabutops Brick Break, so you can beat Sharpedo for Archie's ace. Glacier will be your last strong matchup with Kabutops due to her team being ice types, but be wary of the water type options from the Walrein line here. Kabutops overall this generation is actually somewhat worthwhile through this generation, as long as you're good about getting TMs to teach for a couple key matchups. In terms of Fire Red and Leaf Green, you have a few new rock type moves in this generation. but these only really help against Lorelei, Lance, and Sabrina. Otherwise, you still handle the same matchups well thanks to the ability to teach Surf to Kabutops, as your water type option for matchups such as Blaine and Giovanni still. However, these changes make Kabutops actually a worthwhile option here since it no longer loses half of its possible boss fights. Moving on to Sinnoh, since we can't get Kabuto until you obtain the national dex, we'll be going through as if it was traded over once again. Kabuto in these games is actually fairly useless. With only a couple matchups, it actually really does anything in. Against Rourke, you'll be able to, like Roxanne, 1v1 using Absorb due to how low damage you'll be taking from your opponents. Regardless of the version you play, your next good matchup will be Fantina. However, even though you can beat 2 of her mons, Miss Magius will always OHKO you with Magical Leaf. As for Candace, similarly to Fantina, you'll be able to do some work, but for Diamond and Pearl, Kabutops only matches up well against Sneasel, since Medicham, Snover, and Abomasnow beat it with ease. In Platinum, on the other hand, Snover and Medicham are swapped out for Frostlass and Piloswine, making this gym a lot easier. By the time you have your final battle against Cyrus, you should finally have a Kabutops. This should make taking on Cyrus's team really easy, since his best way to damage you is Gyarados, and you'll defeat his team with Rock-type moves alone. The Elite Four until Cynthia definitely isn't too bad, but members such as Aaron and Flint, even with teams overall weak to Kabutops, will still have some counterplay for it. Aaron has a Heracross with Close Combat, with Flint having Pokemon such as Infernape with Earthquake, and Rapidash with Solar Beam. I would personally not go with Kabutops in these games either, due to how a majority of your opponents, even in your better matchups, will have good coverage for Kabutops. Heartgold and Soul Silver, despite finally having a better TM pool to choose from, I would still advise against using Kabutops in this generation, seeing that even with appropriate coverage, for matchups such as Price's Piloswine thanks to Surf, or Rock Tomb to help against Bugsy, it's still just very tough to justify using Kabuto until you beat the 8th gym in a game due to its low stats, seeing that you won't even have Kabutops until at best Claire. It's really hard to possibly justify trending up Kabuto here. Going into Generation 5, we somehow have one of the hardest games yet to justify using Kabuto and Kabutops in. In Black and White, you were able to access Kabuto in the Dream World. However, since this was discontinued for the sake of this video, we'll count it as if it's something to trade over, since otherwise it's a post-game option. You unlock trading when you unlock access to the Dream World, so it actually doesn't add any new matchups to Kabutops' run. Starting off with Lenora's team, you'll most likely just need to use Mudshot or Scratch here sadly, since your level up moves are pretty bad at this point. We'll be skipping Berg, since even though he's the Bug-type gym leader, he'll have 2 Grass types, so our next gym leader would be Skyla. By the time you get the Skyla, at least you'll have Rock Tomb to damage her gym. However, you'll still do fairly unimpressive damage. Between Skyla and Bryson though, at least their gyms match up so poorly, Rock Tomb along with a couple of potions should make this doable for sure. You'll finally have a Kabutops before taking on Opelucid Gym, which, while difficult, is definitely manageable as long as you're careful of the gym having 3 Dragon Dance options with strong attack stats, being Fracture, Druddigon, and Haxorus. Luckily, their best way to damage you is Dragon Tail, so this is definitely within your reach. Sadly, this will be your last good matchup in these games, since even Caitlyn, who's arguably your strongest matchup, will have coverage on every Pokemon of hers besides Sigilith to beat Kabutops. So overall, I would probably recommend not getting Kabutops, due to how even in the gyms it matches up well typing wise, it's still fairly bad. On to the sequels. Kabutops is somehow even worse by a substantial amount here. For one, you miss out on Bryson's gym, as well as your good matchup against Skyla, since she'll now also have a Skarmory in her arsenal. Even with Skyla's buff, however, this is sadly as good as your matchups end up being in these games, due to the fact every gym leader decided they wanted more Kabutops counterplay for some reason. Overall, Black and White 2 somehow give Johto a run for its money as the worst games to use Kabutops in. Generation 6, you can find Kabuto in the post-game of Pokemon Y, so we'll treat it again as a trade here, which you can do before the first gym. Being a Bug-type gym, this should be rather easy, just slow, since like always, you'll be reliant on Scratch here. Grant's team, you'll need to use Mudshot to stand any chance, but bring a few potions since he'll do a fair bit back with his Tyron and Amora. By Valerie's gym, you'll have a Kabutops before, but you'll still probably need to buy Swords Dance and Lumiose to stand a chance. If you get a +6 on Mawile, you'll be fine. But otherwise her team will just do too much damage to you in comparison. Shauna's team, if you choose Froakie, should for the most part be pretty manageable. However, keep an eye out for Goodra as it'll have Dragon Pulse and Earthquake to pressure on you. By the time you get to the E4, you'll have access to strong moves like Brick Break, Waterfall, and Rock Slide. But it won't really matter a ton for the E4. Malva's team should be pretty effortless, as none of her team has coverage for you, and you'll resist every attack besides Pyro's Wild Charge here. Drazna's Dragalge will be a bit of a nuisance, but if you can beat that, you'll be fine. Seabold's a bit tricky. However, Brick Break can come in handy here, as mentioned for Barbaracle, as well as having Rock Slide for Gyarados to at least do something against it. Overall, I would recommend against Kabutops here, as it's too difficult to even use really until the E4 successfully. And even against the E4, the teams have for the most part ways around it, such as Seabold Starmie and Clawitzer, or Wickstrom's Aegislash. Since Oras doesn't really change anything substantial for Kabutops' viability here, we move on to Generation 7. You can get Kabuto and regular Sun and Moon by trading from Ultra Sun and Moon, which does provide one unique benefit for these games, being Kiawe's Trial. Kabuto should have Mud Shot, which is great for Salazzle since it's 4 times super effective here, making this trial a breeze. Olivia's team will also be pretty easy, but it's using Scald, seeing as your team can't really touch Kabuto. Guzma in these games also is pretty easy, since his entire team loses to a single Rock-type attack. So just teach Rock Tomb to Kabutops, which you can find in Wella Volcano Park. And with that, Guzma is a breeze. The Elite Four in Sun and Moon are fairly manageable besides Hala, as long as you keep an eye out for each of their counters to Kabutops. Olivia is the easiest of these three, since her best ways around you will be Probopass with Earth Power and Alolan Golem with Thunder Punch, but you should be able to manage. Meanwhile, Acerola has a Delmice, and Kahili will have a Skarmory to wall you out. Kukui's team should be pretty easy overall, especially if you choose Rowlet as your starter. If you keep an eye out for Kukui's Magnezone, this should be rather easy. Kabutops, however, being only really usable against a handful of strong opponents, isn't really worth trending up this generation, especially considering how it's hard to justify using it against most opponents. In terms of Ultra Sun and Moon, it's pretty similar to how Black and White was exponentially worse for Kabutops in, with the biggest reason being that you can actually natively buy a Dome Fossil in these games before fighting Olivia. However, this time around, she'll have a Laleep to make this a pain. She'll carry over this to the E4, which also makes this fight a lot more of a pain down the road. Guzma will have a Vikavolt this time around, so that fight now has a bit more difficulty to it as well, due to it having Energy Ball and Thunderbolt for you. Otherwise, at the very least, Acerola and Kahili's difficulty stays around the same, with the only noteworthy change here being Kahili traded her Skarmory for an equally terrifying Hawlucha. While not as bad as Black and White 2 was for Kabutops, it's still the same issue it had in those games of being a significant amount worse than it was in the original games of the generation. Since not much changes about Kabuto's value from Fire Red and Leaf Green and Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, we'll be getting into our final games being Sword and Shield. Kabuto is fairly useless until your third gym battle against Kabu, since you'll have moves such as Aqua Jet for this battle, which should hopefully help, especially if you Dynamax and go for Max Geyser. Our next good matchup will come at our 6th gym, and whether Gordy or Melanie doesn't matter much. All it determines is you'll use Max Rockfall or Max Geyser. As for the Champions Cup, this will be a fully difficult matchup for Kabutops, with your best matchups being against Bede, and if you're playing Shield, Alistair. However, they both have options around Kabutops, such as Bede's team's sheer natural bulk and offense from Hatterene, as well as Gardevoir, as well as Alistair having things such as Giga Drain on Poltegeist and Thunder Punch on Dusknoir. The rest of the Champions Cup, even against Pokemon you'd hit, all have strong options for Kabutops, such as Raihan's Torkoal and Leon's Gmax Charizard, both of which have Solar Beam. Overall, Kabutops only really contributes a lot to the 3rd and 6th gyms, making it hard to really justify, especially since you'll need to use it as a Kabuto against Kabu's team, which is still a fairly frail and weak Pokemon even when Dynamaxed. Overall, I don't actually think Kabutops is really worth using in-game. It takes too long to actually evolve Kabuto into Kabutops, especially when you consider that level 40 in most games means at best you'll have a Kabutops by Gym 6 or 7 if you're lucky. While Kabutops is probably one of the stronger fossils to use in-game, it's just in the end not really worth the effort it'll take to train. And especially in the earlier batch of games, it's a pain to get even a single good move on. Well, that's going to do it for how strong Kabutops is in every game. While Kabutops might not be ultimately worth it to use from a practical perspective, if you personally like it and want to use it, that's always your choice. My opinion on these Pokemon's strengths really has nothing to do with your personal connections to it. Anyhow, I hope you all enjoyed this video. Be sure to comment down below what you thought and what Pokemon you all want to see next. I'll be selecting the 3 Pokemon with the most likes and putting them head to head in a poll for the next choice. So if you want to see your favorite analyzed, make sure you're liking or commenting. So with that said, Thank you to everyone for watching the video. Huge thanks to my phenomenal team and the amazing art done each week by Danny the Demon. I couldn't do all this without them. If you all enjoyed the video and want to see more content like this, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Be sure to leave a comment too, as it really helps us out. I also do other content on my Twitch, where I stream Genshin Impact, Mystic Zora, where I do Pokemon Let's Plays and other gaming content, and of course MysticSage, where I do all anime content. Right now, I'm focusing on Inuyasha and Yashahime, so if you're interested in that, be sure to check it out. If you'd like to support me even further than that, check out my Patreon. Whether it's a $1 tip to get early thumbnail access, or the $10 tier to get cool perler bead charms and a shoutout. There's tons of reasons to join today. These lovely people did, and I thank them all so much for their support. It really means the world to me. I think I'm gonna wrap this up though. I'm Mr. Umbreon, and I will see you all next time with some more amazing Pokemon content.